messenger. Morning, good morning to you. Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling start to what is an incredible week, what is going to be an incredible week. And today is Magic Monday. And we today are talking about the magic in your story. What story do you have to tell? And I wanted to read you, I saw this on a post this morning, so I took a screenshot of it so I could read it back to you. It says, "Dear ancestor, your tombstone stands among the rest, neglected and alone. The name and date are chiseled out on polished marble stone. It reaches out to all who care. It's too late. It is too late to mourn. You did not know that I exist. You died before I was born. Yet each of us are cells of you in flesh and blood and bone. Our blood contracts and beats a pulse, entirely not our own. Dear ancestor, the place you filled 100 years ago spreads out among the ones you left, who would have loved you so. I wonder if you lived and loved. I wonder if you knew that someday I would find this spot and come to visit you." And what got me about that is, that the people who have come before us are not going to know us when we finally arrive on Earth. But the thing that got me, it was, I wondered if you lived and loved. And that's the line that got me. I wonder if you lived and loved. So when you tell your story, you are, you may think that, I don't have any story to tell. You do have a story to tell. Think about life changes. Those key pivotal points in time where you made a decision. What was behind that decision? What made you go that direction? Why do you love doing what you do? Do you actually have a job you love doing? Start asking yourself those questions and putting pen to paper and writing them out for future generations. You can either, handwrite it and leave it alone in a journal. You could type it up and leave it online for them, so it's digital. Although handwriting would be better because then they get to see the handwriting. And some people go, I have terrible handwriting. It is who you are. It is a part of you. When you learn to love yourself, you accept everything about yourself. Your ancestors are not going to know that you hated handwriting unless you tell them in your journals. The other ones that you could do too is talk to text. If you don't like writing, talk to text. So it writes it out for you. Record it, videotape it. One of the reasons behind me I keep doing these daily Facebook Lives is so my grandkids and my great-grandkids and my great-great-grandkids have something to look back on, so that people can see what was life like here and now. They get to hear my story, in part. They'll get to hear the rest of it in a different way. But, it's what are you leaving behind? What is your legacy? Your legacy is your story. It is so important. I mean, I do genealogy because I have a passion to discover how people lived. I have a passion of helping people connect to their past, because we're not actually leaving our ancestors behind. We are following in their footsteps. They have gone ahead of us and leaving a path for us to follow. There's parts of them in our DNA. There's certain traits that get passed from generation to generation. Mine is a trait one of my strongest traits is service. When you look back through both sides of my family, there is service in some way or another, be it military service, firemen, policemen, nurses, ministers. There's all sorts of service, volunteers. It's all there in my DNA. I'm screwed. If I didn't want to serve, it's too bad. It's in my DNA. It's there. And it's a very strong feeling. It's why I joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force, because I had this sense of service. It's why I love to do what I do when I serve people these days. It gives me a great sense of fulfillment. So it's part of my story. It's part of who I am. So think about life-changing events. When did you know that the person that you got married to was the one? Write that down. What was it like? How did you meet? How long had you known each other? I've got friends who have known each other since basically the day he was born, because she's a little older than him. But their families were very, very close. And so she was around when he was a baby. And they've been together all those years. How did your story start? I've heard stories of people who met in high school, when they were 14, 15, 16 and started dating and never dated anybody else. And then they just went ahead and got married and had a great, long, loving marriage. What is your story if you decided not to get married? Why? Future generations want to know, why did I have this maiden aunt? Or what is the term for a single uncle? Because you get the maiden aunt. Is it a maiden uncle? Well, there's a question now, isn't it? So if you decide not to get married, why? Because future generations will want to know, what was it about the time that you were living in that you felt you couldn't find the one for you? Some people just don't get married and they're fine with that, and that's okay. But future generations are going to wonder, why? Why did they not get married? Why didn't they get married until they were 50, when their first marriage? What prevented them from getting married for so long? Was it because they had to wait so long for that right person to come along for them? What is your story? What are those pivotal moments? What jobs did you have during your lifetime? What career path did you follow? Why did you choose that career path? These are questions that come up all along the time. Back in some of the days, it was very easy to figure out what one person's occupation was going to be because they followed in the family footsteps. I've got a third great grandfather who was a bookbinder. And I'm like, how the hell did he become a bookbinder? His dad was a jeweler, or on one report, he was actually a foreign agent. So I was wondering, okay, foreign agent as in spy, which would be really, really cool. That could be where my love for the mysteries come from. But then later on, I found out he was a jeweler. So he was probably a foreign agent in the sense that he was one of those that would get on the ships from England, go to the east, to Asia and India and stuff, and bring the gems back, bring the gemstones back, bring the precious metals back, help create and provide the jewelers with the stuff that they need to go and create their creations. And I'm like, so then how did my third great grandfather, when my fourth great grandfather was a jeweler, how did my third great grandfather end up being a bookbinder? Well, it was through searching through a lot of research over a lot of years with the help of two cousins. One was a second cousin, one was a second cousin once removed. Was it first cousin once removed? Anyway, it was a couple of cousins. And it was between the three of us, it took us like 3 or 4 years before we finally discovered what had happened. At some point between one census and when my third great grandfather turned 5, something happened to his fourth great grandfather, because we found the baptismal record for my third great grandfather. It had his wife living at one address and it had his father living at a different address. So something happened in there, and we're now trying to figure out what happened. But then directly below, and in genealogy, you're always taught, look above the entry, look below the entry. When you're on census, who else lived in the street? Pull up the whole thing so you can see the street. What was and I learned this week is that they didn't just go up one side of the street and down the other side. No, they actually had routes, and you can look up the census routes that they used to take. And sometimes they would go around a block before they then went across the road and went around that block. So now that I'm aware of that, I'm sort of like, oh, I can go back and research some of those, more of those census and things. Look for the census routes. So that's one thing that I learned this week was, it's not just these people aren't all on the same street. And it's like, well, where's the people across the road? Well, now I know why. And it could be a completely different enumerator that did the other side of the street. You'll never know until you go looking at the routes. But anyway, so what had happened to my great grandfather? Now my fourth great grandfather. So now we're trying to unravel that mystery. But with my third great grandfather, we looked above, nothing there, looked below, and there was, hang on, there's the mother's name again with the same address, and this is a different kid, and there's a different guy listed as the father. So sometime between the census that was before his 5th birthday and his 5th birthday, something happened between his mum and dad. We don't know if the father died or if they were divorced, but they did have an address there for it, so we can go look that up. But we looked at the census. When I went back and looked at the last census, that in fact my fourth great grandfather wasn't even on that last census. We couldn't find him anywhere, but she was there. The mother was there along with my third great grandfather. So my fourth great grandmother and my third great grandfather were on the census together, and it said that she was the wife of a jeweler. That's how we found out he was a jeweler. And later on his marriage certificate, my third great grandfather had his dad listed as a foreign agent, which is where the confusion came in. But we looked at the census, and living in the house next door was this guy who was a bookbinder. And it turns out that my fourth great grandmother and him ended up hooking up, getting married, having another kid, and they both baptized her oldest son and her new son on the same day. And that's why there were the 2 entries in there. It's like, now I know how my 3rd great-grandfather became a bookbinder. But it would have been nice to have his words, his telling the story. Or my 4th great-grandmother telling the story about why she ended up marrying the guy next door, what happened to her previous husband. But we don't have her story to tell. So we have to go and dig and find those stories. So think about life-changing events that you have. What can you tell your people? What decisions were you going through? What was going through your mind at the time? What were the living conditions like at the time for you to make those decisions? Also, newsworthy events, world events, things like, if you lived through Hurricane Katrina, where were you on 9/11? Where were you when the pandemic started? I call it the global pause, but most people call it pandemic, so I don't want to confuse people. But where were you when the global pause happened? What happened to you during the global pause? Did you have any major changes take place? Unless you write all this information down, your future generations are not going to know it. And it may be a great-grand niece or nephew that comes looking for you if you don't have any direct descendants. Somebody in your family is going to want to research the history at some point in time. What legacy are you going to leave them in your words to let them know what it was like living in your time, what it was like living through certain events, what were your feelings at the time? So start putting down your words, your story in your words. Everybody has a story to tell. Some people go, I live a very boring life. You have a story to tell. I don't care what your circumstances are. Everybody has a story to tell. You may think nobody would be interested in your story, but 100 years from now, you could have ancestors or great nieces or nephews who are all over your story, wanting to hear your story, and they can't find it. So get ready to tell your story. That is my message for today. That is your magic. There is magic in your story. Even if you think you don't have a story, you have a story. Where were you on 9/11? Where were you when the global pause started? What were your feelings being isolated during the global pause? Did you live with anybody during the global pause, or were you isolated by yourself? How did you feel about having to wear masks? Did you get vaccinated? Did you not get vaccinated? What was behind your decision to do that? Ask yourself these questions. There are people 100 years from now who are going to want to know the answers to those questions. So go out there and get ready and tell your story. Just a little bit each day, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. Just start telling your story so it is there for future generations. That's it from me for now. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling, incredible, magical Monday. Go start telling your story. Start writing down some questions. May even put up a couple of questions in fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. Every day I'm going to ask a question that you can go answer in your journal to tell your story. So your question today is, where were you when the global pause hit? And what was it like living through that time? Did you wear a mask? Could you wear a mask? Did you get vaccinated? Did you not get vaccinated? What was your decision behind that? That's your first story you're going to tell, is your life during the global pause. What did you do? How did it impact your life? How did it change your life? Were you living by yourself? Were you living with family? What is your story for the global pause? Go tell it today. And we will catch you guys back here tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Have a super fantastic, sparkling day. Hey, konera.